Sometimes we get stuck in a baking rut, and a lot of times it happens when you throw chocolate chips into the mix. You think to yourself, I guess I'm stuck making chocolate chip cookies. Well, I'm gonna prove you wrong. All these recipes today are going to use chocolate chips. It seems like these are always hanging out in my cupboard. I don't know about yours, but they're pretty easy to find. The thing is, with this, when we think chocolate chips, we think cookies. These are all cookie-free recipes for these chocolate chips. And finally, chocolate's a great flavor, but it can get a little repetitive. So we're gonna spice it up and mix in another flavor each time those chocolate chips pop into these recipes. With chocolate chips, melting them into a fudge isn't a very original idea, but you can add a kick by throwing in some bacon. So we're going to start by taking 3 pieces of bacon, and before I cook them, I'm actually going to take and I'm going to slice them. The easiest way to do this is to slice them into about 1/2-inch size pieces, and I like to keep them all together. The colder it is, the easier it will be to slice your bacon. So I want them roughly the same size. The reason we want to cut this before we put it into the pan is because it's a lot easier to get it into those crumbled size pieces before we cook it than after. So now I'm going to separate out my pieces and I'm going to toss them into my pan and spread them out a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fry up my bacon like you would if you were going to make it for breakfast. All right, when I have my bacon all fried up and it's nice and wonderful and cooked, I'm going to get a paper towel lined plate and I'm just going to take my pieces out. I want to make sure that I get all of my extra grease off of there. And you want to make sure there's a lot of different ways people prefer to eat their bacon, but you want this to be nice and crispy because this is actually going to go on the top of your fudge. So now to that, I'm going to add the rest of my fudge ingredients. And so that means, while I set this off to the side, I am going to add my chocolate chips and my butter. I need 1 stick of butter. I'm going to start melting that in. And I need 1 cup of chocolate chips. And I'm going to work to stir to combine those. Also, if you had any little bits of bacon that cooked to the bottom of your pan, while you are melting this all down, it's actually going to pick up those little pieces of bacon and it's going to be extra flavoring to your fudge. And when I start to get my chocolate chips melted, I want to make sure that my burner's on a low or medium low because actually the next thing that I'm going to add to this is milk. So to that, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of milk. I'm going to stir to combine that all. And if you want to, you could use a mixer if you have one that'll tolerate your stovetop, but a whisk is fine too. Now to that, I'm going to add my sweetness, and that's going to come from 3 cups of powdered sugar, and that's actually my last ingredient to my fudge base. So I'm going to put all that in, and now I'm going to combine it all, and I'm going to start to thicken it to make my fudge. All right, so it looks like I've got a nice smooth fudge. You can see when I pull up my whisk, I have nice ribbons. All my powdered sugar has disappeared. So to that now, I'm going to get it ready to set up as my fudge. So I have an 8-inch pan here and I've lined it with aluminum foil. That way I'll be able to get it out no problem at all. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to simply pour it into my pan. So now that I have it in, I'm just going to work on shifting it, and I want to work quickly because this fudge starts to set up pretty fast. And now with my little crunchy bits of bacon, I'm actually going to take these and I'm going to sprinkle them across the top. Pretty easy, pretty peasy, pretty piggy. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into my refrigerator, and it needs to sit for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it needs to get to in order to be solid so I can pop it out of the pan. With this s'mores pie, you're gonna bring the campfire from the outside to the inside. It's perfect for a rainy day treat. So the first thing we're gonna do is make the crust, or our graham cracker in our s'more. So we're gonna start with one stick of butter. To that, we're going to add a ½ cup of white sugar. And I'm gonna start by creaming these together. Now to that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla and 1 egg. That's all we need for this recipe. And now I'm going to mix it together again. All right, I'm going to scrape down my edges before I add the majority of my dry ingredients. Alrighty, so to that, I'm going to add 3 final pieces. The first piece that I'm going to add is 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to add 1 cup of flour. And then the last piece I'm going to add is 1 cup of crushed graham crackers. If you're wondering how many crackers that is, you'd need 6 of the big rectangles. And now I can see that my crust is coming together nicely. So I'm actually going to turn it off. I'm going to clean off my paddle and I'm going to finish mixing it all together by hand. With this and those graham cracker crumbs, sometimes you can get dry little pockets in there, so I like to finish mixing it by hand just to make sure we didn't miss anything along the way. And that looks nice, just like that. All right, so now I'm going to start building my s'more. And I have a greased 9-inch pie plate. So I'm going to take my crust and I'm going to split it in half. I'm going to put it into my pie plate. And I'm just going to take and start spreading it out on the bottom. And once I get it kind of started, I like to clean it up with my fingers. That was weird. With my fingers. And your crust is going to be pretty thin on the bottom because remember, graham crackers are pretty gosh darn thin. So I'm going to try and get it all the way out to the edges, and you should be able to do that no problem with the amount that's here. Just some patience. So now we're going to go Sticky City, and on top of this, we are going to put some of that marshmallow fluff that you can buy at the store. So we want just a 7-ounce container of goop. And now we're just going to scrape it all out. That was a weird noise. All right, so this is a messy but delightful step. Okay. I would never waste time transferring this into a different bowl. Okay. That looks pretty gosh darn swell. All right, so now we are just going to gently bob and weave back and forth and cover up our graham cracker crust. And we have to be gentle with this because since we've greased the bottom of our plate, if we go too quickly, it will start to pull up our graham crackers. Alrighty, so we now have that taken care of. And on top of my marshmallow fluff, I'm now going to take and put in chocolate chips. I want a pretty nice layer of this because you'd have a pretty solid layer if you were making a s'more around a campfire. So I want to take ½ a cup of chocolate chips. And now I still have my last half of crust. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab little pieces. It's usually the easiest way to do this. And I'm actually going to flatten them out pretty nice and thin on my fingertips. And I'm actually going to now make a sandwich almost and start to make it look like a s'more. If you're brave and daring, you could try and spread this out over the top, but I just feel like pinching these pieces before you put them down is a little more guarantee, and you don't undo all of your hard work of making your s'more pie. All right, so now I have my top graham cracker, but now we want to make it look pretty enough to eat. So I have mini marshmallows now, and I have a cup of them. I'm just going to sprinkle these over the top. And then this will end up getting kind of that toasty campfire look, putting it in the oven. And then on top of this cup of marshmallows, I'm going to sprinkle 1/4 cup of chocolate chips, just like this. All right, now we'll put this in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes. You'll know when it's done because it's turned nice and golden brown, and we'll take a look at it when we get back.
Exactly, the limit does not exist. Very good. All right, make sure you study for the test tomorrow.
Hey group, we're having the party tonight at my house. We're gonna get maybe a bit turned. Do you wanna come?
I don't know. I really want to go, but I should probably study. Sorry, I gotta study for the test.
Yeah, well, your loss.
Yes!
Responsibility. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
So we have the s'more pie out of the oven and it smells delicious. You've got the melty marshmallows, the melty chocolate. You want to dive right in. You can't. You totally have to be patient, even though you don't want to with this. It's one of those things where if you cut into it to enjoy the deliciousness, it's gonna ooze and melt. And if you put some in your mouth, you're gonna burn your mouth and then you're gonna regret your decisions. You have to wait until it's totally cool before you can cut into this delicious s'more pie. This chocolate strawberry cake is pretty easy to bring together, and it has a really strong chocolate flavor and a kick of strawberry. And remember, we're throwing in those chocolate chips to get that rich chocolatey flavor. So we're actually going to start with 1 cup of chocolate chips, and to that 1 cup of chocolate chips, we're going to add 1.5 sticks of butter, and this is going to be the first thing that gets going in our cake batter. Now the thing is, these chocolate chips need to be melted, and the best way to do that is to melt it with the butter. You can melt it on your stovetop or you can melt it in your microwave. So we'll melt that and we'll add it to our bowl. So I have my chocolate chips and my butter melted together, and to that I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. And I'm going to start gently mixing this together, and while I do that I'm going to slowly add my 3 eggs. To that I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So now it's lightened in color a little bit, but that chocolate flavor is still really intense. The last thing we're going to add is 2.5 cups of flour, but I don't want to put it in all at once because we know then we get the poof. So I'm going to start by just putting in a tiny bit, about 1/2 cup or so, and that's going to start to slowly thicken it. So I'm going to put it on low. And now I can see it's starting to clump up a little bit. And the last thing I'm going to add is 1.5 cups of water, because now you can see it's much too thick to be a cake batter. So I'm going to slow it down. And now I have my perfect chocolate cake batter. You're gonna notice if you're a person that's a box cake mix person that this batter looks a lot different than the store box mixes that you find, but that's okay. It's just one of those things where when it's homemade, it looks a little bit different. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm going to put it into my 8-inch round pans. My cake pans are lined with parchment paper and I sprayed them with a vegetable spray. And I bought these pre-cut, but you could just take a rectangle and cut it down if you wanted to. I'm gonna fill 2 of these with my cake batter, and then I'm going to put it into a 350-degree oven for 40 to 45 minutes. I'm going to check it with a toothpick at 40 and see if we're done or if we need a little bit more. So we'll let this bake and then we'll come back together. While our cake's in the oven, we're gonna mix up the frosting for our chocolate strawberry cake, because if you notice, we didn't put any strawberry into the cake. The strawberry comes in the frosting. So this homemade frosting starts with a whole pound of butter. So we're actually gonna use 4 sticks of butter. So we'll put those into the mixer. And we are gonna mix these all together so they're light and fluffy. All right, now taking it back down to low, we're actually gonna add 6 whole cups, that's a lot, of powdered sugar, but because this is a layer cake, we're gonna need lots of frosting. Oh, that was a lot more than I anticipated. There's like a cloud. You may want to use a measuring cup to transfer it over to your bowl. So while that stirs, I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit. All right, so as we're stirring, there's gonna be times where we need to wipe this down off the paddle. So we're gonna use our rubber scraper, clean that up, and work on combining the rest of our powdered sugar. So through the magic of editing, it's a little cleaner around here. You may notice it's glistening as I've washed the counter. And I now have my 6 cups of powdered sugar mixed in. I'm gonna add the last of my wet ingredients. So that means we have a 1/2 cup of heavy cream. It's gonna help so that the frosting spreads a lot easier. And then to that, I'm gonna add about 3/4 of a teaspoon of strawberry extract. And that's gonna give us that nice, rich strawberry flavor. And then to give it the look of strawberry, I'm gonna add just a few dots of pink food coloring. And now, just so that my frosting is a little bit more exciting, I'm gonna check and make sure that I've got all of my edges scraped down, and I'm gonna add one final ingredient to it. Remember, we're cooking with chocolate chips, so we want them in everything that we make. So what I did is I actually took some chocolate chips and I processed them in the food processor. So now instead of chocolate chips, they're more like chocolate nuggets. And I'm gonna take 1 cup of these chocolate nuggets and I'm gonna slowly incorporate it into my frosting. I wanna mix it by hand so that it doesn't break up these chocolate bits even more. So give it a nice crunch when we're taking a bite out of that cake. Now I'll have another layer of flavor to my chocolate strawberry cake. My cakes are cooled and I actually put them in the freezer for a little bit so that they'd be a little firmer. And now I'm going to start making my layer cake with my frosting. So I'm going to take a scoop and I'm going to put a little bit in the middle, just like this. So I have a nice layer of frosting in there. I'm going to leave a little bit in from the edge just because I know that when I put my cake on top of this one, it's gonna squeeze it out a little bit. That I've got my first layer frosted, I'm going to take my second layer out of the freezer. And you can see how pretty those chocolate nuggets look mixed in there. So before I put my cake into the freezer, I actually cut off the top to level it. So now I'm gonna peel this piece off. My parchment paper gets left behind. And now I'm gonna work on frosting my cake all together. I'm actually gonna start by frosting the edges. I feel like that works the best. So after I have my first go around on there, I like to look and see if there's any spots that are thin. Then I'll go back and I'll add a little bit more frosting just so that it's nice and delicious. The nice thing with this frosting too is you could flavor it almost any flavor. And I kind of like too that since it's a lumpier frosting, if you get a couple crumbs from your cake in there, you're not even going to see it. So if you're not a huge fan of frosting cakes because you're worried about it getting messy, this is a perfect one because it'll camouflage it so well for you. Alrighty, that looks pretty good. I'll put some finishing touches on it and we'll take a look at everything we've made.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To
Not look the other way.
It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us, all of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Okay, so my 3 challenges. Challenge 1, they have to have chocolate chips. All of them have that. Challenge 2, can't be a cookie. And there's no cookies on this table. And challenge 3, it has to have a strong flavor to hold up against all that chocolate. Bacon, check. Marshmallows and graham crackers, double check. Strawberry, boom. All 3 hitting that mark. So remember, the apron's optional, but the flavor isn't. Strawberry cake.